You know, I must admit that I'm not really a religious man, not really at all, but I can't tell you how many times I've looked to the heavens just praying for a solution to help my mixes sound even just a little bit better. Well, something strange is coming over me. It's almost like I'm about to experience the presence of God. If you want to experience some heavenly saturation, then join me for this episode of I Don't Have a Band right now. Hey there, I'm Dan, the self-proclaimed lonely rocker. Welcome to this episode of I Don't Have a Band. This is the series devoted to the home studio enthusiast and the home recording musician with videos really just designed to help make your home studio life better. So thank you for joining me. Today we're looking at God Mode from Denise Audio. This is a really versatile saturation plugin with all sorts of features that are really going to help you with your mixes. Now, in the digital world, we're often looking for plugins to create some warmth and coloration in what's often a very sterile and cold world. So saturation plugins have become pretty much the norm for most mix engineers. Now, we can throw a tape plugin on there and just sort of simulate an old tape style distortion or saturation, but why stop there? And that's really where God Mode comes in. They've taken the saturation concept literally to the next level. And they've got this technology that they call push-pull that borrows from the old Pultec sort of push-pull design where you can push the gain on a frequency and pull it back at the same time, which creates a warmness and a roundness in your tone. So I'm really curious to see how that works. Well, let's not waste any more time. Let's jump in and take a look at God Mode from Denise Audio. Okay, first off the top, full disclosure, I was contacted by a representative from Denise Audio who asked me if I'd be interested in checking out this plugin. I have not been paid for this review, but was provided a copy to check out. Absolutely no obligation to do anything with it. As is policy with my channel, I only review products that I would absolutely use myself. I do get offered a bunch of different products and I pre-screen them and I check them out. And if it's something I use, I'm happy to feature it. And if it's just something I'm not going to use, honestly, I'm not going to spend 2 days making a video on something that I don't like. So I did spend some time with God Mode and I think it's a really incredible plugin and I felt it was worth sharing with you guys. Okay, I'm going to give you a basic overview of the plugin so you can see what God Mode is all about. Excuse me while I put on my headphones. So as you can see right off the top here is that the interface for God Mode is really, really simple. And this is typical of pretty much all Denise Audio plugins. A very simple, clean interface, but they pack a lot of features into this little window. So to start, if you're familiar with like a multiband EQ or things like that, you've got your saturation adjustments here in the window. You just grab the node and you pull it up. I should mention there are 3 different types of saturation built into the plugin. You've got tape, warp, and buzz, and you simply dial in as much as you want. You can blend elements of all 3, or you can just do one, just simply by sliding to the value that you'd like to mix in there. And you can get some really nice blends, and that's how you can really customize the coloration for your different tracks. There is a random button here, I guess, if you want to have some fun and roll the dice and see what you get. Who knows, you might get lucky. Okay, so let's just kind of go through the order here. High pass, low pass. You've got a pre-high pass, low pass filter, so that's pre-saturation. That's a really effective and useful tool if you're looking to sort of concentrate your saturation in a particular frequency. Like, let's say, for example, you're not going to be touching anything in the lower registers. Well, why waste any time? You can just roll those off. Same thing with the higher frequencies. You can sort of narrow the spectrum of that sound. You've got your standard mix knob. You can 100% saturate it or 0% and blend to taste in between. And then you've got a post high pass and low pass filter. So when you bring in some harmonic content, some saturation, things like that, you may introduce some frequencies that you don't want. I'll demonstrate that here in a second. You can roll them off top and bottom so you can get it just right. The pull feature, I'm going to demonstrate that in a second. Another interesting feature here is the dry wet panning. You can actually set your saturation. You can pan the dry to one side, the wet to the other side, or any combinations in between. Get some interesting effects that way. I've seen that used effectively on things like vocals and things like that. And then a standard makeup gain. If you need to add a little output gain, you need to bring it back, you can compensate with the makeup gain. So let's play. I got a little guitar part here. I'm just going to play it for you. So there's a little delay in chorus, and that's post God Mode. So we're looking at the tone coming from the guitar, and those effects are actually after God Mode. So what we're going to do, just going to play around with the plugin a little bit so you can see in real time what it actually does. So I want to demonstrate the high pass filter. For example, let's roll off the bottom. So I'm just killing those frequencies even before I start. Let me roll off the top here as well. Okay, so I'm going to blend in some tape here. Bring in some top end. So now I want to demonstrate this pull feature. First of all, here's the plugin off so you can hear the before and after. Definitely a lot more present, brighter for sure. Now, if I'm going to take the pull and push it, basically turn it off. So there's the full saturation effect. And now I'm going to start introducing it into the signal. So you can see it's rounding out that sound, really sort of warming it up a little bit. Maybe too much saturation brought a little too much harshness into the signal. Here's the before. Here's the after. And then with the post high pass and low pass, if I want to take a little bit of that top end off and tighten the bottom a little bit. Maybe a little too much. So again, here's the before. Here's the after. I really like the fact that you can carve and shape your sound a little bit as opposed to just throwing some saturation on there. You can really dial into the areas that you want to address, and the ability to carve out the frequencies that you want to work with or get rid of is really, really useful tool. Skips a step. I mean, typically that's something you would do with an EQ anyways, you know, especially if with the guitar you're going to roll off some of that bottom end to make room for the bass guitar, things like that. But it's very, very handy to have that within this plugin. So what I'm going to do, I did spend a little bit of time with the plugin, so I want to give you a practical example of using this plugin and just so you can see it in action. Now, typically I'll have multiple plugins in my plugin chain, but I want to show you how God Mode alone can solve a lot of issues. And this mix I'm currently working on certainly has quite a few of those. I got drums, bass guitar, and double tracked guitars. And I was going for a real big guitar sound here, and the guitars seem to be taking over the whole show here. The drums are pretty non-existent, and the bass is getting lost in the mix. Let's have a quick listen to it. So those drums are pretty non-existent. So obviously in a mix situation, like I said before, you're gonna have a number of different plugins, but I wanted to take a look at God Mode on its own and see what it could do to improve the sound of the drums. So what I've done here, I've sort of identified with the graph approximately where that kick drum, the main part of that kick drum is happening and where the meat of the snare drum is, and then a little bit of top end. I'm using mostly a tape saturation, just mixed in a little bit of warp. And if you notice, my mix is sitting down about 23%, so there's not a lot there. With the high pass filter, this is something that I want to draw your attention to and something that I just talked about. You know, rolled off a little at the bottom, pre-saturation, a little bit off the top. I actually didn't touch anything after the fact. And then and the pull is considerably high. I've pulled down quite a little bit. I didn't touch the dry wet, and makeup just gave it a little bit of a boost. So again, here's a quick before. And here's the mix after with God Mode added to the drums. Let's take a look at what I did here with the bass guitar. Again, with the high pass filter, I was able to roll off some bottom end too, and a different adjustment than what I did to the drums, trying to keep the bass and kick drum sort of out of the way of each other. I mixed in a bit hotter on this one, but I'm using a lot less tape saturation and a bit of buzz. And in terms of the actual adjustments I made, I wanted to bring some articulation and presence into the bass. So I cranked up the saturation more on the top end, a little bit on the bottom. And again, with pull, actually, I pulled about 76%. So I'm pulling it down actually quite a bit just to smooth it out a little bit. So again, here's a quick listen to it before. And now let's pay attention to the bass guitar after I've added God Mode. So already a huge improvement. And like I said, I'm just using God Mode right now in a real case situation when you're mixing. Obviously, if you're using channel strips, EQs, compressors, and things like that. But God Mode, if it's doing this much on its own, you can imagine what it'll do in context of your other plugins. So the question is, now can I add God Mode to the guitars? Well, of course I can. So again, first thing I did, the high pass filter, I rolled all the bass off below 162. So I brought that ahead of the bass guitar. Didn't touch anything on the top end. Mix is 50%. I used quite a bit more tape saturation, about 75%. I didn't use the other two. And again, I pulled it back down about 70% just to clean it up a little bit. Again, no other makeup gain. So let's have a quick listen before I've added God Mode to guitars. Now we'll take a look at after. So as you can see, God Mode on its own is an extremely useful tool. I really love the fact that you can carve out frequencies and really help place your instruments in the mix. Of course, like I said, in context of a real mix, when you've got other plugins on the go, if you're using your favorite EQ and compressor and things like that. But God Mode on its own can really help you find placement for your tracks, on top of adding really exceptional coloration. And there's enough customization here that you can dial in your own sounds. You'll find that you'll have use for God Mode on every track in your projects. And it's one of those plugins I think could easily become your secret weapon. Well, there you have God Mode from Denise Audio. I really like this plugin. You know, in an era when saturation plugins are standard fare and there's so many of them out there, it's really refreshing when someone comes forward with something new and unique. In a digital world where we have so much flexibility, why limit ourselves to an on-off switch? You know, God Mode really steps up the game in a saturation plugin where you have so many tools that are really easy to use. And ultimately, that's what struck me about this plugin. It's simple to use, it's simple to navigate, but there's a lot of really great features there. You don't always have to grab your fader. I mean, carving out the right saturation and coloration and just a little EQ sometimes is all you need. And God Mode has grabbed all of that logic and put it into one plugin. So that's a really useful tool to have in your arsenal. But you know what? Why take my word for it? I'm going to put a link to Denise Audio in the description. I encourage you to go check it out for yourself and see if it's something that you'd find useful for your projects. Well, if you're new to the channel, I hope I've earned a subscribe. I've got a lot of videos on this channel geared toward the home studio enthusiast and the home recording musician. So I hope you'll hit that subscribe button and come along for the ride. If you really want to support this channel, I am on Patreon. Links to everything I've discussed are in the description below. And above all else, I hope I'll see you again in another video. As always, if you have any questions, let me know in the comments. And please like, subscribe, and ring that bell to stay up to date. Remember, you don't need a band to rock and roll. There are a lot of great musical projects you can do by yourself, right from your own home. I hope to see you again next time.